Welcome to the Mama Yogi Bear podcast.
All right. Hi, Brad.
All right.
Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here today. For those listening in, I have Brad David here today. He's the founder of Adventure Athlete Fit. It's a fitness program based in Georgia, and he incorporates a lot of natural body movement into his program. And we'll discuss a lot about this later, but his program looks nothing like the typical workout program, and for very good reasons, which we'll discuss pretty soon. I just thought I'd hand over the microphone to you, Brad, and let you introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you're about, and what are you passionate about?
Yeah. I'm Brad, and I'm a physical educator, a strength and conditioning coach. And for my whole life, I have been completely obsessed with mythology and ancient cultures and ancient history and indigenous ways of living. And so my quest has been to combine all of those passions into a system and a philosophy that helps other people live holistically and also kind of maximize their potential. And fitness is one of the best ways to start with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know for me, fitness, I see it more as movement, because when you talk about fitness, I think a lot of people think about the typical workout program, like the beach body
Right.
and things like that, lifting weights. But when I changed my conception in my mind and of how I view fitness as just adding more movement into our lives, more natural movement into our lives, it completely changed everything for me. And that's why I was so interested in when I came across your Instagram account, because I saw that you were incorporating that into your program. And not only that, but when I looked at all your posts, it always reminded me of this quote that I had read in a book called Go Wild. And in fact, we talked about this a little bit before our previous conversation, that a quote that really stood out for me was that human beings are the Swiss Army knives of movement. And I never in my life thought of human beings that way, because I always thought that we were pretty weak. In nature, a cheetah could just, attack us in a heartbeat. We can't really run that fast. But when you look at all the types of movements that our body can do, from, I always think of a ballerina all the way to, the heavy the heavy weight lifters and the swimmers and the boxers. I mean, there's so much variation to our movement that it's pretty amazing what the human body can do. So whenever I looked at your post, I always thought of you as like, this is an example of a human being who is the Swiss Army knife of movement. He's at this optimal fitness level. So I thought I have to talk to him, because I have to find out what he's doing, because he's definitely, you're definitely onto something here that I think that a lot of other fitness programs aren't. So can you explain to us the differences between your approach and the typical approach to working out?
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be good to just kind of start with where the health and fitness industry is currently.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have a background in exercise science. So I have a couple degrees in kinesiology. And I've worked in all kinds of different rehab facilities and sports performance facilities, and worked with even collegiate athletes at certain points. And so I've seen kind of the full spectrum of what our current health and fitness industry promotes and what it does well, and where it's lacking a little bit. And there are several things, big glaring things that I see in our current industry that are troubling and have led to Adventure Athlete. But the first one is really just the purpose behind exercising in general. So whenever people come to me, it's always a little disheartening, as someone who loves movement and someone who does this for a living, to just see how many people inherently, they just do not like exercise. They don't like moving. It often brings back a lot of feelings of some childhood experiences involving exercise or sports or something like that, or it's just uncomfortable for them, or it's boring for them. And I think a lot of that starts with our current model of health and fitness, which really comes from several areas. And so the first being, a lot of the methods and techniques that we use now are sort of a trickling down of the sports performance industry. So in our society, those people that are the top sports performers are the pinnacles of health and fitness to us. And so we end up mimicking what these athletes are doing in the gym. So we do a lot of strength and conditioning, but at the same time, 98% of us are not actually going off and playing the sports afterwards. So we're kind of training like athletes, but not really living or doing the movement of athletes after the training. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect there between what we're doing and why we're doing it. The other big sort of influence on our field is the bodybuilding industry. And, you know, again, that's a sport and that's a competitive sport. But as those techniques and motivations and methods trickle down to the regular population, all that's kind of left over are the sense of aesthetics and perhaps our kind of insecurities or body image. And there's a lot of vanity that comes down in it as well. So, you know, the third purpose for people too is just health. So people say that they want to do things because they know it's good for them, or they go, oh, my doctor said I should, or I know it's going to be good for me. I know it's worth doing, so I want to do it. But even when they say that, there's no real heart to it. It's kind of like brushing your teeth. No one's really passionate about brushing your teeth. They just know it's good for them, and they want to have teeth for a long time. So that's kind of the first thing that I noticed after working with all these different people in all these different settings, is that no matter where you go, I'm kind of running into those three sort of motivations, but that's not really matching what an average person wants out of their fitness or wants out of their life, or it's just not getting deep enough into it. You know, people want to be healthy for deeper reasons and reasons that are actually important to them. So that's kind of the first sort of tenet with Adventure Athlete that I like to do. Is the tagline is, I want you to become the hero of your own adventure. And so that means we need to find a purpose and a motivation that actually means something to you and resonates on a deeper level.
Yeah. Yeah, this reminds me of, you know, because you've done a podcast interview before and you forwarded that to me so I could prepare for this interview. And I left, my husband and I listened to that interview, and I'm pretty sure it happened to him too, but I left that interview because we're going for a walk up these huge hills and outside in nature. And I just felt like this, you know, sprint to my walk, you know, like we're just like, yeah, we got this. And after the interview was over, I just wanted to go run around the woods like Catwoman. I wanted to jump on the boulders and, you know, just train with that adventure in mind. And it really clicked in my head, you know, that's what's really missing in our workout programs, right? Because it's so, you know, okay, guys, let's do 20 repetitions of lifting these weights. Okay. And then you're doing that. And you're like, okay, why am I doing this again? Oh, I guess they told me this is good for me. It'll sculpt my body. Right. Okay. And it's painful.
In 12 weeks, you might notice a difference.
Yeah, but you're introducing the fun element of it that we had in childhood, right? That's why we moved so much as kids, because we had that imagination and that adventure and that fun element to all of this. And we weren't doing it just to work out. We're doing it because it's fun and was keeping us active, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it really starts with the imagination component too, because when anyone comes to work with me, the first questions I ask them are, what are your goals and why do you, or what do you want to achieve by working with us. And the answers that I'll always get are kind of the things I was explaining. People will say, oh, well, I should improve my strength, or I think I need to get better stamina, or I would like to tone up. And what all of this means to me, when you boil it down, because they're just kind of parroting things that they think I want to hear, right? They're saying what sounds like fitness industry stuff. But what that all boils down to for me is these people have an inner perception of themselves that is not currently matching their outer perception or their outer perspective, right? And so they see something that they're not happy with, and they want to change that. And so the first step is to talk with people about who that person is that they see inside. And that's what I kind of call your inner hero, or your adventurous self, right? And they don't really care about toning up. They don't really care about improving their stamina. What they want to do is they want to feel like their best selves. They want to feel like their heroic self. And my role, because I know it has to be motivating, is to start building that image of the person's heroic self. So I'll ask them, when you are, think about a year down the road when you've been doing this level of fitness, or think about yourself at your top physical condition, or at a healthier point, what do you look like? What do you feel like? Are there areas of your body that are painful, or are you pain-free? What kinds of mental states do you experience? Who do you hang out with? What kinds of experiences are you having? What kind of adventures are you going on? And so it's working with people to develop this mental picture that resonates on an emotional level of, that is my heroic self. And that's the person that I want to be. And that's the person that I know I am inside. And I mean, what's more motivating than that?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's the opposite of just thinking, okay, well, we're going to tone you up and your biceps are going to grow an inch and your stamina is going to be great. And you're going to be able to do these kinds of workouts. And it's more of saying, really start thinking about this, really start connecting with this during your exercise, and realize that while you're exercising, you're not working towards being your heroic self. You are your heroic self in that moment. The heroic version of you is the person that commits to doing these movements and commits to learning these skills. And so there really is no progress down the road. It's about making that choice to be your heroic self in any given moment or any given day. And it starts with imagining who you are heroically, who that person is, which most people haven't spent the time to do, honestly.
Yeah, I know I haven't. But when I'm implementing more movement into my walks, for example, I notice that I love to like jump over things. And maybe it's, kind of me remembering my gymnastics days, because I used to do gymnastics when I was younger, but it's just so much fun. But so far I've been really looking at it from a, more fun approach. And I think this whole adventure and superhero approach really seals the deal in your brain, in your mind. It makes a big difference when you're starting to, implement more movement, more natural body movement into your life. If you can see it from that imagination and fantasy perspective of who you want to be. Like, man, when I was a kid, I loved, what was it? Bruce. One of your posts you mentioned, if you want to move like Batman, train like what was the name? I'm forgetting. My husband is gonna.
Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne. Sorry, I don't know why I wrote Bruce Willis. Bruce Wayne. My husband loves Batman. He's gonna like roll his eyes right now. But anyway, but I thought that.
Hey, you can move like Bruce Willis too.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he's kind of badass. I don't know. Or used to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I thought that was cool. Like, if you want to move like Batman, train like Bruce Wayne. Exactly.
Yeah.
Have that in your
Yeah.
mind. Yeah. That's cool.
And that's a place to start with people too, because kind of that imagery and the visualization of coming up with your inner hero, that can be a challenging process for a lot of people. And that there can be a lot of obstacles along the way to people discovering that aspect of themselves and having a good image that they believe in and that they know is inside them. And so a lot of times it can just be easy and a little more intuitive maybe to start with the heroes that are external to us, but still resonate with us. So I'm a huge nerd. I mean, obviously. And for just like with that, what you quoted with me, there are days where I'm connecting with my own inner hero. And then there are days where I feel like Bruce Wayne, or I want to feel like Batman, or, and so you kind of start to have this sort of imaginal Justice League of characters that form your sense of motivation and your sense of purpose. So, and that I think that's just so much more motivating than saying I'm motivated because I want to tone up. That's not going to get you in the gym. What's going to get you in the gym is saying, oh, right, for 30 minutes, I can kind of pretend like I'm doing Batman stuff, or I can connect with this hero that means a lot to me. And that, for me, that ends up actually being a lot of sort of fictional characters or whatever, but there are real life heroes, and there are heroes within our families and that sort of thing. And so it's really just about the process of finding out who are these larger than life individuals that motivate you and want you and inspire you to be the best person you can be.
Yeah.
And then start living it, embody them, in especially through movement, because it's a very potent thing for humans to do. We're physical beings, and physical movement and all sorts of physical sensations create emotional and mental and spiritual changes in us as well. And so it's just a good entry point for people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love how your program is, you have a very holistic approach to fitness. But like you were talking about, like incorporating this adventure and the super inner hero into your mindset. Someone listening to this will say, well, I'll just do that, while doing Beachbody or lifting weights. So how does this look different with your fitness program? Because you're doing things pretty differently here. You're not, from what I see, like you're not there in front of a mirror lifting weights every day, and it's a very holistic approach, right?
Right. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying, where when you head out into the woods or on the trail, you're kind of naturally finding yourself jumping over things and vaulting over things. And so that's the big draw in the actual sort of practice of turning our exercise into this opportunity for us to embody our inner heroes. And it's that. So it's movement. We want to exercise, but then we also want to move. And I think current gyms, let's say you do have a good purpose, or you do say, I'm super motivated because I want to exercise in this way. And then the next thing you do is you go to a gym. So there's kind of stale, sanitized, not really decorated 4 walls that you're stuck in, and which are not engaging. And then all around you, there's either televisions to distract you, there's loud music that's blasting, again, to distract you. And or like you said, there are mirrors all around, right? Because there's just to sort of bring the focus back onto maybe our insecurities or the things about us we're trying to improve aesthetically. So we're just put into this unmotivating environment that's really not engaging. And for a lot of people, it's intimidating as well. So for someone to approach exercise machines, you know, there's a learning curve, but there's a learning curve that still doesn't really teach you anything about your body. You're figuring out how to use a machine so that you can work one muscle or two muscles. And the same with even sort of barbell training and powerlifting and whatnot, which I think is great, and that's a component of adventure athlete. But you know, there's etiquette in a gym of learning how to use a squat rack and how to work in with people and asking people how many sets they have left. And so I think there's just a big barrier to entry, and there's a lot of intimidation coupled with just the purposefully unstimulating and distracting environment of a gym. And so for me, one of the main tenets of adventure athlete is to exercise out in nature. So nature is inherently stimulating. It's inherently intuitive. Like you said, I don't need to necessarily teach you how to pop up and over a branch or something like that. Or I don't have to teach you to go run when you see a nice field. Like you kind of, it's a deeper emotion in us and a deeper desire when we're in these environments to move. And it's therapeutic. You know, there's just countless research at this point of everything from immunity to mental states to, I've even seen progress, like people just progress faster in nature than they do in a gym. So that's a huge component. And I think that's where, unlike Beachbody, like you mentioned, or sort of other fitness programs, I'm really playing on the intuitive aspect of exercise and movement, which means there's an element of creativity, there's an element of play, there's an element of exploration, and most importantly, it's that dichotomy between exercise and movement. Mm-hmm. So exercise is something that it's a movement that we are inherently making harder so that we can produce an adaptation, right? So we're isolating certain movements so that we can see how we can grow in strength or power or endurance or something like that. Movement, on the other hand, is all about expression, and it's all about efficiency. And so we're trying to say, how can we perform this movement as easily and as energy efficient and maybe as creatively as possible, which is really the exact opposite of an exercise, which has a strict form due to safety and strict form due to the adaptation that we're trying to receive. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just understanding the kind of dichotomy between the two and appreciating the balance between them. So there's a time for regimented strength and conditioning, but in adventure athlete, it's always going back to the movement skill. And it's saying, instead of just doing pull-ups so that we can be good at doing pull-ups, I'm always saying, okay, if we can climb on top of this branch, there are 4 or 5 cool things we can do to climb on top of this branch, or once we're up on top of there. And there's some techniques that can help us get up there efficiently. And that makes us feel confident in ourselves. It makes us interact with our environment in a better way, in a deeper way. And so that kind of the movement skill can dictate the strength and conditioning. So if you're having trouble getting up on top of that branch, now we actually have a tangible purpose for doing pull-ups or strengthening our lats or something. And it's saying, okay, you want to be able to do this skill. Let's spend a couple weeks working on this and then practice this in the meantime, and we'll watch it come together. And so the fitness has an experiential goal that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. So much of it is just adding movement back into our lives, right? It's just been kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like calculated out of our lives through the environment that we live in. I mean, especially here in the States, yes. I feel like everything's designed for you to be sedentary. I moved here from Brazil 20 years ago, and I just remember thinking like, wow, we always walk from one chair to the next. Like that's all we do all day.
Yep.
So I wake up, I walk to, the dinner table, I sit down, I have my breakfast, I walk over, I get my coffee, then I sit down, go to the couch, and, or I get in my car, it's another seat. Very much different from growing up in Brazil. I remember us having to walk to the bus stop, and after that we would walk downtown. It's kind of like more of a European setup where you would be walking a lot more. And here it's very much designed for sedentary, which makes a program like yours so much more important, because it, it has a more intentional, it seeks to really reincorporate these natural body movements that we just don't have, right? And we lose that the ability to have because of our sedentary lives, that it's no fault of our own, because it's just the way the environment is designed. Like, why would you not want to sit in your super comfy couch all day and watch, binge on Netflix,
Yeah. And I like to call it a vocabulary of movement. And there are so many different things that we can learn, or like a window of movement, right? So as sedentary Americans at this point, if we're walking on a trail, we know, or like within our vocabulary is, we can walk on the trail, we can maybe run, but a lot of us can't. We can sit down when we see a bench, and then maybe we can get up and down off the floor, right? And so those are maybe the things that people even think of. But to most people, if they're walking on a trail, their vocabulary is, I can walk and I can sit. And so what a small window of movement that provides us. And so the big perspective shift of Adventure Athlete is to systematically start expanding people's movement vocabulary in that window, so that now when you're walking on a trail, you can actually engage and look in your environment and see, well, that bench, you can balance on it, you can vault on it, you might be able to do some push-ups on it, right? If that's one of your goals. But you can run, you can crawl, you can kind of hop or leap from things, or find things that you can throw and things you can pick up and toss to your friend or something. And so it's sort of developing that perspective, or developing that adventurous eye, and the competency to do those movements too, right? Because I think there are a lot of people, if you took them off the street and had them try to balance on a log or hang from a branch or something like that, there is a real possibility of them kind of injuring themselves, or just the competency is not there for it to be fun. So you have to spend some time developing that confidence and that competence, so that you can enjoy it.
Yeah, and I like the term that you used, the vocabulary term, because I think I was definitely one of those people that, I would go on a walk, and those were the only two movements that I would think of. I can either walk or I can sit down. And I mean, this is me in my 30s, and I'm already thinking this way. So imagine where I would be in my 60s and 70s. I can only imagine. And now
exactly
expanded my vocabulary so much, because now I see a log, I just want to vault over it. I want to walk along it. And a lot of this was also from, observing my children, because I think they're the closest in our modern day species to natural body movement, right? Just observing them. I just find it so fascinating to observe them. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that too. If you have any thoughts on, it's just curious, because I know your childhood was pretty fascinating, and you can talk a little bit about that too, growing up in Florida and how that informed, your upbringing and who you became. I'm curious if you could, talk a little bit about what your childhood was like and how you see maybe childhood today. If you see any things that are missing, and I don't know, maybe some suggestions for parents. Is that too big of a question? Maybe we can start off with your
No.
childhood first.
Yeah, sure.
How it was like.
Sure. It all ties in. And I think there are definitely two distinct phases of my upbringing. But for my early childhood, I grew up in Central Florida. So we lived on a lake, and we were about maybe 20 minutes from Disney World and Universal Studios. So we could see the fireworks from Disney from our backyard every night. So it was really from a very young age, magic and myths and heroes and action have always been a pretty deep part of my life. Because my dad was in the film industry. So that's why we lived so close and lived in Florida and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So I would, as a kid, I would be able to watch a movie like Star Wars or Indiana Jones. And then on the weekend, we would go to one of the theme parks, or I would be helping my dad on a film set or something. And I would see these grown adults, stuntmen and women, acting out these roles. And so you could see a live show of Indiana Jones doing this, or you'd see, I mean, the 90s was like the golden age of stunts, in my opinion. So that was right before kind of computer generated images took over. And so you had some of the coolest physicality being represented in movies at that time. And so as a kid, it just seemed like a no-brainer. Like, you see these adults doing heroic action moves in movies, and then I got to see them in real life do that. And so for me, it just became sort of obvious that as I was going to grow up, this is just what adults do. Adult life is actually like Indiana Jones, and it's actually like Star Wars. And so you can imagine my disappointment and my subsequent rejection of life once I actually became an adult. And now you see why I'm doing what I'm doing. But that was huge. I mean, that was completely life-changing for me, to just have that sort of experience to show me that real life people are acting heroically. Movement is a part of adults' lives, and not just movement, but heroic movement and action. You know, and then the other just wacky part about being in Florida is we would be waiting to go to school in the morning, and the ground would shake a little bit, and then we would all know to look a certain direction, and we would be able to watch the space shuttle take off from our house, just as a normal occurrence.
Wow.
And so again, that was another just situation of all around me were real life examples of larger than life heroism and exploration and action. And so it was just deeply ingrained at a very young age that when you grow up, you got to be active, and you got to move in cool ways, and you got to live heroically, because you could see it everywhere.
Yeah. And a lot of your childhood was also spent outside, right? Just in the natural elements, like in nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The wildlife of Florida was really incredible. And we lived on a lake. And at that time, our neighborhood was surrounded by either woods or orange groves. So as a kid, we had so much freedom we would take out, canoes or paddle boats or something like that. And we could paddle through the canals and lakes, and then find just woods where we could beach the boats and go up and explore. And those are some of my favorite memories as a kid, because we had so much freedom to just explore nature around us. And with Florida too, I mean, there's all kinds of poisonous snakes, and our lake had alligators that were 14 feet long. So as a kid, there were, literal dragons in our backyard, and there was a real sense of adventure and a sense of danger by going out and doing this, which, as a kid is only enticing. There's no fear as a kid. So it's seeing how close you can get to the 14-foot alligator, or knowing that it's lurking around while you're in the boats. That fostered that sense of of adventure in me as a very young kid. And my dad, of course, completely encouraged it as well. So
Oh, wow. So he
that
was
was very
afraid
nice.
of you being eaten by an alligator or anything like that?
No, a lot of times in Florida, you just, you know, the realities of it. You know, alligators are not very dangerous. They're very shy in reality. Obviously, there are accidents that happen and whatnot, but I remember one of my earliest memories was my dad encouraged us to go climb into like a culvert that was connected to the lake. So just a sort of like drainage culvert that went in. And so we went and explored that. And then I think that drove my mom crazy when she found out that we were doing that. So my dad wasn't too worried about it, but my mom definitely had a little more of that self-preservation,
Yeah,
or
it's
wanted to
interesting.
instill the self-preservation.
Yeah, it's interesting that dads seem to encourage a lot more exploration and adventure compared to moms. Obviously, I'm generalizing, but it's the same situation here at home, where my husband is always encouraging them to, yeah, go for long walks in the woods all by yourselves. And I'm thinking like, well, we have had bear sightings here, and I got my brain is thinking of the dangers, but I'm trying to really pull back on that, because I notice that the more I interfere with my worries and concerns, the less they want to go out and explore. So
Right.
I've really tried to just kind of, be more aware of that, of how my input, and concerns kind of really impact, their
Yeah.
sense of adventure. Because I think it's really missing in today's childhood, the childhood that you had and I had too, is just that sense of adventure. And does that worry you at all in terms of the future adults that are coming up, and if they're not having that kind of adventure in their lives, out in the woods and exploring by themselves, kind of thing, because they're so worried about
Yeah.
all the risks and danger. It's always danger, danger, danger.
Right. Yeah. And I do think that can be a concern. And, I live in Athens, Georgia, which is where UGA is. So it's a college town, and I work with a lot of professors, and I'll hear from professors these days that even their college age kids, their parents will call them every day to wake them up for class
Yeah.
when they're in college. And so it's like, it kind of, that goes a little bit beyond the adventure, but college is an adventure, right?
Yeah.
And so even that, I think that sort of thing is worrying to me. I think that a bit, that idea that you need to really teach a human being to be comfortable going out on their own, and to be comfortable knowing that there are risks, and knowing that there are dangers that can befall you, but that also teaches you how to keep your head on a swivel, or how to encounter and adapt to these sort of things. So it's almost by keeping kids away from adventure, we're actually kind of ensuring that the danger gets the better of them.
Yeah.
So I do think that's a risk. But back when I mentioned there's kind of two phases of my childhood, from the ages of like 9 years old to, I would even go as far as to say 18 years old, for me, I lived on the computer, and I lived in video games. I lived on instant messenger. um, I was still going out into the woods, even kind of as a teenager, an early teen, but that was more to just be moody and escape
Yeah.
my parents, as opposed to really appreciating nature, right?
Yeah.
So I think on the one hand it's worrying, but on the other hand, I'm actually a perfect example of like a kid that didn't really play any sports
Mm.
for a long time. I was obsessed with video games. I was obsessed with the computer, like many kids are. And this was right when the internet was coming out, so it was really kind of unbridled in that point. Um, and I turned out okay. And
Yeah.
I think the key to that is I did have good role models, in terms of, my dad and both of my parents would always say, if we would go on a family vacation or something, they would give us little jabs and be like, "Oh yeah, this is the analog world. Like isn't this nice? Like the trees are real. It's not just
Not
a
digital.
digital world."
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those little things kind of really stuck with me. And I think my parents were good role models in the sense of appreciating nature and appreciating being outside and moving. So you got to give a lot of faith to kids and knowing that eventually they're going to get the lesson.
Yeah.
Right. You might teach it to them when they're 9 and they're not going to get it when they're 18, but that's my experience living on the computer for 9 years is really what a huge part of what makes me appreciate and love the fact that I can do this stuff adventurously in real life. And that's, eventually being able to run and jump and flip by pressing a few buttons on a controller isn't anywhere near as valuable and invigorating as being able to learn how to do that in real life.
Yeah.
And so it kind of came full circle. The video games I was playing made me want to kind of explore the real world a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because it was so cool and adventurous,
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting that you say that. That gives me a lot of hope because I think in the unschooling community, like, I'm an unschooling mom, there's always that concern about letting our kids be on screens too much. And there's some unschooling parents that say, oh, you can go on your screens whenever you want, all the time. And there are others that are kind of really worried about that aspect. And I've always been pretty worried about that. But I also realize that we're also providing a very balanced life and really trying hard to be that role model, emphasizing being outdoors, being active, experiencing the real world out there as opposed to only being on the screen. So yeah, I love that you pointed out that you had great role models, and the fact that you spent so much time on screens allows you to really appreciate the real world. So that's a hopeful message there to many parents, I'm sure.
Yeah. And that's, and I did have the environment as a younger kid to go out and explore. And so there were those experiences too, but I think that's really it. It's finding that balance, because as long as you're reminding kids and giving them that chance to really feel how cool nature is and how joyful movement can actually be, then it really will come around. And like I said, the games that I was playing were usually kind of adventurous, heroic sort of action games anyway. And so that just sort of made me think, wow, like these little plants that I'm gathering in this game, I wonder what kind of plants I can gather in real life, And so it does, it can make things a little mythic. It just gives you that mythic perspective to then take out into the world. But I think you have to have that experience. I think a lot of kids potentially are not having that balance or those little doses of nature early in life. And I can even see it in the architecture. I don't know about you, and you're in Virginia, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I can even see the way that homes are being built now, like townhomes, and there's just a shifting model of less and less yards and more. I mean, as long as you have Netflix, it just kind of really close in together. And so that's also a little worrying, because I had those nature experiences that could kind of pull me out of the digital world and go, wait, there's something better. But I think a lot of people are just growing up, starting out right in a place that doesn't have that exploration. And that is dangerous, I think.
Yeah, just thinking back to my own childhood, growing up in the 80s and 90s in Brazil, what really saved me was that there were a lot of kids out to play with. So we were always playing outside. What kid doesn't want to go outside to play with their friends, right? But, I very much grew up in a city, like, big cities all my life, and really lacked that exposure to nature. But one of my most memorable moments of my childhood was always going back to the countryside with my family, visiting another family that had a house there, and just our adventures out in the woods, and just like the tropical beauty. I mean, I remember once we were walking down this beautiful creek, and there were these golden monkeys just like swinging from the
Oh,
trees. I mean,
wow.
imagine like a Disney cartoon. It was exactly
Yeah.
like that. And I just remember being just, wow, this is amazing what we're experiencing. And we were all by ourselves. Parents weren't around. So it was just really, really impressive. So I always go back to that moment, and looking back, that was pretty seminal for me in terms of making sure that my kids have those kinds of experiences, making sure that we
Exactly.
have nature around us. Um, and now with movement, so movement and nature together is just creates a magical world and
Yeah.
brings so much joy to your life, right?
Yeah. And nothing beats it. I mean, that just you telling me that experience gave me chills because you know how real that feeling is, and you know the
Yeah,
sensations that are around something like that. And I really don't think a video game or a screen is ever going to compare to that.
yeah,
And that is, seared into your brain
yeah,
and your memory. And I think as long as kids are continuing to have even a fraction of an experience like that, I think we will always remember that we can return to nature for sure.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I'm so glad I discovered this. I mean, I'm on a rewilding journey. I keep repeating that, but it's really changed my life, just kind of adopting these like, primal living aspects back into my life. Cause I feel like my DNA has all this whole time wanted it. And only now have I discovered and been able to like really conceptualize, like, okay, this is what was missing. So I got to just incorporate that into my modern day life. Uh,
Right.
and into my family's life. And it's been so joyful, and it's been amazing to see the kids too, rediscovering nature and, making mud bombs and throwing it in the creek and just playing with mud and allowing them to be dirty too. That was one thing
Yes.
too that I think my generation of moms were so worried about, letting kids get dirty, because we think about germs and this and that. And
Right.
I've noticed that the more I allow them to play, I mean, there all those fears that I had were really non-existent. Like I worried about glass or this and that, but we've never come across like a snake or all these dangers that I thought would be out in nature.
Right.
We just have fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And even when those things do happen, that teaches someone how to be resilient, right? Or how to handle
Yeah.
these things when they do happen, and overcome them
Yeah.
if they do. But you're right. I mean, it really intuitive is almost doesn't encompass it, but it's almost like a nurturing, right? You
Yeah.
Things are safe if you're doing things right.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. Yeah. Well, let's switch gears just a little bit here. I have to ask this question. My husband is a Marine Corps veteran, and when he was listening to the other podcast interview you gave, he said, "Oh, you got to ask him this. Do you get any interest from veterans for your program? Because he said a lot about what you talk about resembles the exercise program taught in the military, including like the superhero aspects. They always like look to like the colonels that made history, the generals, and
Right.
kind of embodying that in their program. I mean, I'm wondering if you do get a lot of interest from veterans.
Yeah. So I have not. I'm trying to think if there are any veterans that I work with currently. I have worked with some in the past,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I haven't yet, and I wouldn't say that's any reflection on anything other than just kind of the state of where my business is right now. Honestly, I haven't needed to do a lot of advertising or things before that, but um, I can see. So I definitely borrow and get a lot of inspiration from the military
Mm-hmm.
for a couple reasons. And one is, if you're looking at an institution that can take people from all walks of life and ability levels and bring them up to a certain standard of movement competency, the military is the pinnacle of that, right? So they can take and they can take all kinds of people, all kinds of shapes, sizes, weights, and get them to be able to all do the same movements with the same level of confidence. And so their kind of system and methodology for that is good inspiration for me. And so I do draw a lot of the kind of, not a lot of it, but a good bit of the programming can be similar to the military. But then the other reason is military are some of the only groups of people that still have to use these movements occupationally. And so they really are, you have to teach your people how to do dive rolls, and you have to teach your people how to climb ropes and carry other humans around. So there's a lot of overlap. And I think you and I had talked about this, and I know I sent you some materials before our podcast about this whole kind of lineage of exercise. So when I was working in strength and conditioning in all kinds of sports facilities and whatever, I started to see these failures of our current industry. And so I just kept looking back in time and thinking, okay, well, when was there a time where our fitness did actually match human movement and when its motivations were better? And that's when I discovered the natural method, which started in France. And that was the physical educator, Georges Ibert, started this movement. And he was a soldier who was in a natural disaster in the early 1900s where a volcano erupted. And this guy had to save, I think it was 700 people. He coordinated and saved 700 people from death during this volcanic eruption. And that impacted him so much that he dedicated his life to being, or to developing his own system of teaching movement to people, because he saw how quickly that fell apart during a natural disaster. And so he started the natural method, which is sort of the lineage of fitness that Adventure Athlete is based off of. And there are others, like I'm sure you're familiar with MoveNat.
Right.
Yep. So MoveNat is also based off of the natural method, which was started by Georges Ibert. So it's sort of like a source text that you can interpret differently and use for different inspiration. But anyway, he based the natural method off of soldiers training in the 1800s, which went back to soldiers training in I guess that was like Napoleonic times, but then all the way back to the Middle Ages, and which then they drew upon Hippocrates and ancient Greek training methods. So it's really cool. When the Cold War came around, that's when our fitness really shifted to kind of sports performance. And then when Arnold Schwarzenegger came around, that's when our fitness shifted to bodybuilding. So you have the Cold War influencing sports, bodybuilding influencing that whole thing. But before that, fitness was really the realm of the military. And because of that, fitness was all about movement capability. We didn't have to be big and bulky. We had to be able to climb and run and jump and fight and carry things and whatnot. So so that's why it's cool that he picked up on that. And I've had veterans reach out to me through social media and say, "Are you a veteran?" Because a lot of this stuff is very similar to the military, and it's for me, it's just bringing that stuff to the civilian population. For the purposes of joy and exploration and feeling like a hero and feeling adventurous.
Yeah. You probably get in the military through their work programs and etc. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, no, it definitely resonated with him, and he's like, "Well, that's exactly what we do in the military." Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Yeah, because a lot of my previous interview, Uncivilized Vitality, that I had with Dr. Mori, he has a wellness program that focuses on the lessons learned from hunter-gatherer way of life. But my husband was listening to that too and was saying, well, that's exactly what we do in the military.
Very cool.
But it's interesting to bring that back to, the civilian population, which I think it's really, really lacking for a lot of people. When I first heard the term movement, I actually had to think about it. Like, what do you mean movement, or even natural body movement? Like, what is that?
What's natural movement? Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't really understand what exactly it means, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be challenging. And that's the biggest thing, like we talked about with that vocabulary of movement, is it's developing almost, well, you said it perfectly too, the Swiss Army knife, right? Or like your utility belt, but your utility belt are these different movements, right? Your Swiss Army knife are these different techniques and ways of maneuvering through obstacles or maneuvering through our environments that we can draw upon.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is just knowing that we can do it,
Yeah.
and then practicing it,
Yeah.
knowing that it's possible for us to do these things.
Yeah. It's so much fun when you start increasing your range of movement, right? When I start doing things like, oh, wow, I can actually do this. This is pretty cool. Just in
Yeah.
my everyday life, and just the fun element of it is what really sealed the deal for me. Because now I'm just having fun. And, I feel the strongest that I felt in 20, 30 years, really.
That's awesome.
Even when I was doing Beachbody and all that stuff, I think I looked strong, but now I really feel strong. I really feel like there's vitality in in me. Yeah.
And that's where the movement really comes in, because I think there's the term of like gym strong and then farm strong, where it's like you can lift things with handles and with even weights and with well calibrated resistances all day, but that doesn't really prepare you for lifting hay bales and or whatever. And so that's how you can be farm strong. But in the same sense, there's gym strong and there's adventure strong, and that's one of the great equalizers is balance. And I don't care, I could get the most jacked person and I could also get the most sedentary person, and on their first day here, I'm going to put them on a balance beam because they're going to be equally as terrible at it,
Yeah.
and so it's just nice to see that no matter, like, that's what was missing in all the other areas of fitness I had been working with people in, is the strength and conditioning got us to a certain point, and it was great for injury prevention and kind of longevity and health and whatnot, but they still couldn't really balance, or they still couldn't quite get up and down off the ground with efficiency or something. And so that's that what I call being adventure strong, which is the implementation of those movement skills to actually develop that competence.
Yeah, it's all about competence, right? Yeah, for you to live your life in the most, in the best way possible. As a mom, I want to be able to get off the ground and run after my kids. If they're climbing up a tree, I want to be able to join them. I don't want to sit back anymore looking at my phone, while they're doing all this movement and having all this fun around me. I want to join in. So this is awesome. In a way, I feel like you're reintroducing people to their inner child, that they've lost a long time ago.
Exactly. Well, and that's when I was thinking about your question earlier, when you were asking about, what do you think about children now versus children then? My primary concern is actually with adults, because children have playgrounds. Children, I mean, even though I don't think they're getting nearly as much as they need to, they are still at least given these areas and these times in their life to explore and to play and to be goofy. And for me, I see the value of that in adulthood completely. And, most importantly, if you want your children to carry this on and to actually do this, they need to see you doing it. So it's not, you need to be able to play as an adult, and you need to be able to move as an adult. And if all they see is you just walking and sitting, then when they become a certain age, they're going to think it's time to put up that hat. And then now all I have to do is just walk and sit, which is completely ridiculous. So I think we have a duty as adults to be in touch with our inner child. Yeah, it's very healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was definitely that mom that would sit at the playground looking at my phone up until when I started discovering this world of natural body movement and just seeing the world as filled with opportunities to move. Whereas before I just thought like, well, I walk from the car to the bench and my kids go play. Oh, I'm so bored right now, And now I join them in the playground. I'm jumping. I'm like that crazy mom at the playground.
Yeah.
And in fact, this last weekend we were at the most amazing playground that I've seen ever, because it actually has some built-in risk to it. The slides are really high up, and it's a really impressive playground. I've written about it, but I just kept looking at it and thinking, like, why can't we have playgrounds for adults? Like, they have those gym equipments outside and stuff, but why can't someone come up with something that's made for adults, that we can go to? I think there are some gyms coming up, right, that kind of have events, but just fun places for us to move more.
Yeah, and that is actually how, like, the birth of the idea of Adventure Athlete was probably when I was 14 years old, and I just said, why aren't there playgrounds for adults? And then and like that was kind of my mission then. It's like, oh well, I'll just create an environment where you can lead people through relearning how to play and relearning how to explore. And what's fascinating though is that it really is a deep relearning. People are very uncomfortable with unstructured movement playtime in the beginning, and it's very awkward for them to and I'll do something simple, like you can pick 3 moves. So like, okay, we can rock on our back and kind of, roly-poly a little bit. We can get up and down off the ground, and we can hop. And now I'm just spend 4 minutes going through those 3 movements and just see how you can tie them together, see how you can go fluidly from one into the other. And, 15 seconds into it, people are stopping and just sort of like looking around and wondering what to do next. And so it's sort of that ability to let go, which is super popular right now in terms of flow and flow states. But I don't think it's really anything different than just playing like a kid on a playground. Honestly, it's tapping into the same thing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, I know that when I join them in the playground, I definitely get a workout out of it. I'm breaking a sweat.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gasping for air. Like, now I know why kids, in the wintertime when we go out, they start taking off their jackets and stuff, because like it really is a workout. We're just standing there freezing, but they're like, we're missing out. We need to join in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I have one more question for you, because I think we're running out of time, but have you made any changes to your house in terms of allowing more movement? Is your partner on board? Because I know I've had some challenges, because the whole point of allowing more movement into your house is kind of getting rid of furniture, which seems so radical at first, right? Because that couch there is so comfortable. My massive king bed here is really comfortable. I mean, and also, well, if she hasn't been on board, what has been your approach to convincing things to change a little more?
Yeah. Well, my wife is completely supportive of my lifestyle, to the extent, and this is sort of a funny question because I actually work from home. So the gym that I'm in right now is actually the garage attached to our home, or once was. So for me, I knew what I wanted to do as far as teaching movement. It had to be an example, but I couldn't do it in a strip mall. So I had to build it, and I had to find a venue. So I've kind of gone on the extreme route, not in terms of lifestyle, but just in terms of creating a space to move. So this whole gym is something I built myself. And then the Earth Gym, which is sort of our outdoor arena, that's something we just finished a couple months ago. So having an outdoor space was very important to us. But as far as indoor things, we still have a decent amount of furniture. We still sleep in regular beds, and I do think that's a journey. And like I said, my wife's been super supportive. So I tried sleeping on the floor for a couple weeks, and
Yeah.
It actually happened to be when I was sick with COVID. So it was this weird
Oh.
sort of like stoic lifestyle where I decided to sleep on the floor while I was sick. So anyway, that didn't work out as well as I wanted it to. But you know, as far I think a lot of that stuff is a journey.
Yeah.
But when it comes to creating change, I think being the example, especially when it comes to family members, if there is one
Mm.
piece of advice I've learned about health and fitness is like, you're never going to convince anyone of anything. Just do do what you want to do, and when they're ready, they're going to come to
Yeah.
you, and make it seem fun. um Bringing the fun back in, you know, definitely.
Mhm.
But I think also kind of a good coaching thing. I've borrowed this from nutrition, but it's much it's much easier to implement things that you want first before taking away things that you don't want, right? So it's easier to eat more vegetables than it is to take away sugar or soda. And
Right.
so I think those kind of lifestyle changes, from the rewilding sense, are just as good. And that could be something as simple. I was trying to think of easy, accessible things for anyone, because I can have a lot of pressure from seeing movement people that get rid of all of their furniture, right? And you think, oh wow, well I got to do that. That's a huge step.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe getting an exercise ball and just having an exercise ball in your living room is
Yeah.
a perfect first step. So now you have something else to sit on. You can toss it around. You can lay on it in weird ways. You can play with it. Um, a simple, ooh, I got it right here. This
Mm.
is not planned, but right, like a 2x4.
Oh, wow.
This costs nothing, and
Right.
you can tuck it away in a corner, but you
Mhm.
can also have it down in front of your desk or while you're cooking dinner or something. It's easy to slap down, and now you can be balancing on a beam, and you can
Yeah.
practice all the balancing skills you need to. And that costs like $6. Um,
Yeah.
Gymnastics rings are another really inexpensive way to have a place to climb or hang. You know, you can do 100 things on a pair of gymnastics rings, and you can probably get them for like $20 or $30.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do exercises, right? Just have them to hang on
Yeah.
and swing around on, and kids love them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Like,
think it's sorry, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, it's more, for me, it's more about having these little opportunities to add movement in, and then kind of those larger lifestyle decisions, such as taking away furniture or something like that. um, I think that tends to come when the time is right, and it's similar to exercise. Like, you can get someone to go on a walk with you a lot easier than you can get someone to commit to a 12-week CrossFit program or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
it's start small and then start fun.
Yes. Yeah. Baby steps, and also leading by example, like you said, right? Just show them that you're having fun doing this, and they'll come to you when they're ready. Definitely with with COVID starting in March, my husband was more open to installing all this kind of playground stuff in our living room because we were stuck at home
Mm-hmm.
and we had nowhere to go. So we have like a yoga swing, we have a trapeze bar, a climbing rope. And it was originally, for the kids because we wanted them to just be more active. And recently we have monkey bars too, but it ended up
Cool.
being used by the entire family, and it's given us so much
Exactly.
opportunity to move because it's right there in our faces. And we're always hanging, and it's not like we make it intentional, like, oh, okay, I gotta go hang right now to get my movement in. It's just, you see it and you just have fun with it.
Yep.
But just having it there has made such a difference. And I think he's really, really on board with adding more stuff because he's been using it too, and seeing how fun it can be. But like you said, the couch
Yeah.
stuff, that's for much later. You shouldn't start with throwing away all your furniture. It'd be pretty drastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, yeah, I think it's finding balance. right? It's just having that good balance between, and I know in our house, we, like I said, we have plenty of furniture, but there's also a purposeful amount of kind of floor cushions, and it just mainly space, right? It's just, as long as you have an open enough space for someone to move around, that's a good opportunity, at least for me. But again, I have the movement vocabulary to where all I need is space. So I think having, starting with some nice simple tools like gymnastics rings help us hang, a 2x4 can help you balance, and a ball can help do all kinds of things, but it's just kind of a fun tool to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love your 2x4 idea, because we definitely have this in our shelter, not our storage room here. So, because my husband is building a tree house for the kids, so we have plenty of that. And I never thought of it as like, wow, this could just be my balance beam here. That's genius.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, and that's my big thing with helping people too. Is just, you don't have to buy the $150 piece of equipment, even for natural movement. Like, that aspect of the fitness industry is infiltrating the natural movement stuff too, where it's like, get a 2x4. You can buy a little kind of like a shoe tray and fill that with river rocks, and now you've got a stimulating surface, and it doesn't have to cost you more than $4 or $5 to play around.
Oh, I wanted to ask you a question. It's more for me because I love yoga. I love doing it. There's definitely parts of it. I think there's like the fatigue style of yoga that just kind of makes it hard. And I think that's why it turns some people off. But when it's, really nicely put together, it can be such a nice experience. But what do you think of yoga from a natural body movement perspective? Do you think it's a good addition to your movement routine, or do you think it kind of falls along the lines of like more how fitness is these days, with the repetitive motions and things like that?
I do think it falls a little more into the line of repetitive fitness, but I'm also, I try very hard not to be a gatekeeper for movement like that, because I mean, honestly, at this stage, whatever gets you moving is incredible. And keep doing it. But to answer your question, so you kind of want to think about the purpose of yoga originally. So if the purpose of yoga is to create a certain amount of flexibility so that you can meditate for longer periods of time, then, which is my understanding of the original intent of yoga, then that's what yoga is good at preparing you for. Yoga is good at preparing you to have good seated posture, which means there's a lot of work on the low back. There's a lot of work on the hamstrings. But it's ultimately preparing you for a sitting practice. And you can kind of answer that question by just looking at it inherently as well. And it's done in a linear fashion on a mat that is a rectangle. And so there's a lot of things that are forward and backwards, and a lot of things are forward bending. And so I see, one example with yoga would be that I've experienced from doing yoga is just seeing that most of our population's structural issues these days are that we were forward here, and a lot of yoga has us continuing to bend forward, right? So like the forward fold and a lot of that stuff. So that's just kind of a little example of how it's doing what it's intending to do, but as a repetitive exercise that fits into kind of a holistic thing. You sort of want to look at what movements is it continuing to repeat within us. And so, but I think there are a lot of great aspects of yoga, and especially the ones that lead to greater meditation and kind of mind-body control. But I think it is inherently a little limiting in what it can do as far as flexibility. And I work with a lot of people that have done yoga for a long, long time, and when they come to me, there are still a lot of deficiencies. And so that's where I can see how it's not really a holistic system. It's a routine for stretching certain muscles so that you can sit for longer periods,
Yeah.
comfortably.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too once I started to learn more about the natural body movement world.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it pretty much was back into that, still set in that repetitive motion, and a lot of it also, I mean, depending on who you're practicing with, you know, a lot of it, like the power yoga, is so based on like fatigue and getting you like, oh, it's painful, but it's good. You know, it's like that kind of negative associations. And at the same time, they're telling you like, just calm down and breathe and you can work through it. Whereas natural body movement is like enhancing your range of movement while having fun. It's not like, you know, no pain, no gain kind of thing. It's a positive, fun experience. So that was the game changer for me.
Yeah. And that's from a coaching standpoint, and with me as a biomechanist too, it's one of the main issues I see with yoga in general is just the level of education that the instructors have in terms of knowing what's actually being done safely and what's done correctly. So I've seen very many times the idea of, as long as you can get into the movement, it doesn't matter really how you got there. And that's where I end up correcting a lot of injuries down the road with yoga is, you know, you can, like a forward fold, for instance, there are ways to get into a forward fold that aren't really stretching your hamstrings at all, or like only stretching your hamstrings, but not stretching your lower back. And so it's like the moves in yoga themselves, if they're not coached by someone that has a good understanding of the biomechanics, can end up sort of stretching tendons and ligaments that are compensations for us doing what the actual intention of the move was, if that makes sense. And so there are some particular kind of routines of yoga. I think Ashtanga is one of them, where there's a high prevalence of like low back injuries later in life due to people were just stretching out their tendons and ligaments in the wrong ways, basically. So that's my biggest concern with yoga is like, just be very careful about who's teaching it, because there are a lot of weekend classes, and just because you can get into the position, in my experience, more often than not, doesn't mean you're actually doing it the way it's supposed to be done. And you can be causing damage because of that, because of those compensations.
Yeah. And so much of it is not quite natural body movement. Some of it is, but some of it is not really. Like you wouldn't like, I don't know, like be twisting like this for, you know, 2 minutes kind of thing, right? I mean, you'd probably this. Sorry, microphone here, but you'd probably look back, you know, for a split second or around, you know.
Yeah. And my answer to yoga is, as far as adventure athletes concerned, are those ground movement positions, which you've probably seen me do a good amount of them on Instagram. But I also have a lot of guided ones on my YouTube channel as well. And so the idea with that is you have these sort of base movements that expand our vocabulary, and they're practical. So we can actually use them to get up and down off the ground and move on the ground. But then within those movements, I really invite variability. And so all the different ways that we can turn our head and twist an arm or reach and move this way, that's going to create a completely different stretch and sensation than having a set routine that you're doing the exact same way and there's a perfect way to do it. So the way I teach those natural ground movements, you get a lot of the same effects of yoga in terms of increasing flexibility and building a mind-body connection and all of those things. But it allows you to, I think it actually deepens your mind-body connection, because it allows you to listen to your body, and on a different day or on a different series through it, you're going to reach and bend and move in ways that your body wants you to in that particular time. And you're going to stay in those stretches for as long as you want, or you can go a little faster. And so that's been my my sort of answer to yoga as a way of giving people those same sense of value, but making it a little bit more holistic and a little bit more practical and safe as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The injuries down the line do concern me, because I'm just practicing, excuse me, yoga, having fun, and it feels good. Most of the time it feels good, but then I kind of worry because I'm not a biomechanist, like you.
Right.
So, sometimes I like to push myself a little harder than maybe I should, because I feel like I should be doing these splits a little better, darn it. And, it might not be what my body is quite ready for at the moment.
Right. And that would be, yeah. And that's like if you're trying really hard to get that split, you might get the split, but it's by compensating with your lower back instead of actually improving at your hip joint, for instance. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing I see with yoga is that sort of compensations. That's just done out of ignorance. Honestly, they just don't know that's not the right way to be doing it.
Yeah. And we also come from a competitive kind of state of mind, just being the way we're brought up, like our whole world is competitive, and you're looking at the next person doing an amazing split, and you're just like, let me try to do this a little better. And you forget about the biomechanics of your body and what's really going on. And stay safe. And the older I get, the more this becomes more important.
Yeah. But yeah, in general, I really don't want to speak against yoga though. So if it's what you like doing, that's way better than most things. And I would say just listen to your body. That's the key. Don't force things. You're going to have a lot better progress if you stay within a realm of mild discomfort and you just let that mild discomfort naturally dissipate over time. That's how you should progress. But it's where kind of the forcing things happen that's too much.
Right. I think it's also a great gateway into the world of movement, because I think it's
absolutely
the most similar thing we have to natural body movement in the, mainstream fitness world.
Yep. I agree completely. Yeah, it's an awesome gateway in.
Yeah. Well, so I'll ask you our last question here before I ask you where we can reach you at and things of that nature. But if you could give one single piece of advice for the listener, what would it be?
Yeah. Okay. Let me think about this for a second. I had a couple things in mind. But I think I mentioned this in another interview before, but I'll say it again here. It's just think about whatever your movement practice is currently. So whether you're going to a gym or you're just going outside for a walk or you're just going out into your yard, it's just think of one thing that you can do that makes you feel heroic. And that can be emulating one of your own heroes. It can be emulating maybe a favorite scene from one of your favorite movies or books or something. Or it can just be kind of getting in touch with your inner hero and thinking, all right, what's something that I can do right now that's going to make me feel cool? It's going to make me feel heroic or mythic. And that's, if you have a current exercise routine, that's such an easy thing to implement. And just, Indiana Jones swings from a rope, so I'm going to find something that I can swing on, right? And for the 1 minute that I'm swinging on this thing, I'm going to try to kind of feel and embody or just have fun with it, So that's it. But then the other thing I would say, I know you said one piece of advice, but here's two. The other piece of advice is no matter what you're doing, really just take 10 seconds during it or right after it to be thankful that you've done it. I think we're so quick to tack on all these things that we have to do as chores, and we don't realize, like I mentioned in the beginning, while you are doing these things, you are being your heroic self. You're not working towards this ideal person. As you're doing it for that moment, you are that ideal person. And that's incredibly powerful and motivating. And there's science behind that in terms of building a habit, right? But I think taking the time to stop and go, wow, I did that today. For this period of time, I was my ideal self. I was my inner hero. That person came out and I got to live that person for this minute. And I am so thankful that I gave myself that time and I allowed myself to cut out all the other busy things and all the tasks that I had to do and just focus on being the person that I wanted to be for whatever period of time that is. That seems to be the biggest piece of progress I see people make, is when they can actually stop and appreciate what they did and appreciate that they've connected with that part of themselves. That's what makes it a habit. And the only way that we're going to change things is if people can do this for the rest of their lives and stay sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Connecting. It gives me goosebumps here. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's like we said before, it's a whole holistic, really a holistic approach. It's mind and body and the present moment, right? That present moment awareness and making it happen today and connecting within yourself with that hero.
Right.
Yeah,
it really is a philosophy.
Yeah.
There's the whole system, which is the actual exercise and how we make it work within an hour session.
Yeah.
But it's a philosophy of viewing your life and viewing fitness, because the current way that we fit fitness into our lives is not sustainable and it's not motivating. And so we have to change. We have to do something that makes this more inherent to our inner selves.
Yeah, because working out is not working out. Someone said that. For a lot of us, working out is not working out. Like it's can't relate. It's unrelatable. It's too repetitive. It's painful. So I'm really glad that people like you are starting to show up more and just rethinking the whole world of fitness and try to reintegrate the fun aspects of it back into our lives, because that's where the change happens, right? When it's fun. Like it's funny because this weekend, after listening to your previous podcast interview, for some reason while I was cooking, making the Thanksgiving meal, I just felt like dancing because I was waiting for the sides to finish and the turkey and whatever. So I was just standing there and I really tapped in. So for me, I tapped into dance, like the natural flow of dance, and not like how anyone else dances. I'm sure there are a lot better dancers than me out there. I'm not the best dancer in the world, but I also filmed myself, but I wanted to just see how I looked, but I forgot about the camera and I just really tapped into it. And I kind of included some yoga moves and some natural kind of animal flow moves. And then when I watched it, I was like, oh, this looked great. And what was the difference between this? Because I've done this before, filming myself dancing. And I was just like, wow, not good. Never showing that to anyone. But this time it worked because I was really tapping into what you were saying, like that ideal sense of myself. And it was all in the brain, and once you tap into those ideas in your brain, your body kind of just wants to follow. And I thought it was magical. So thank you for that experience.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's the whole point, is the more we can practice this within a 1 hour exercise session of saying, for this hour, we're going to tap into our inner selves. The easier we can tap into ourselves in any facet of our lives, and the quicker we can just pull it in. So that's really cool. And I think dance is the massive component of ancient culture and mythology and indigenous cultures currently, and our culture. So that fits right in with Adventure Athlete. It's about the expression and the creativity and being yourself.
Yeah. It's really liberating. I mean, it's really
good
in charge, but it's awesome to have someone like you who really knows about the biomechanics of this, of the human body and, how to optimize your fitness level. But do you have any YouTube videos and stuff like that where people can maybe see a few of your classes, or how can people reach you? Because now everything's online, right? How can people get in touch with you and find your program?
So my website is adventureathletefit.com. And I have a YouTube channel that is the Adventure Athlete Training System. And there, I have a lot of stuff on there. So I have kind of some Zoom classes that I've recorded in the past. I have little bits and pieces of my in-person sessions that I've retaught to the camera so that people can follow along and practice. So a lot of those natural movement warm-ups are things I've been working on now. So yeah, definitely my YouTube channel, Adventure Athlete Training System. And then I believe my Instagram is Adventure Athlete Fit as well. I might be wrong on that, but I think it's Adventure Athlete Fit. Okay, cool, good. I forgot to get that straight before the podcast here, but yeah, and that's where you can find me. And I am doing online training. If you're in Georgia or close to Athens, Georgia, I do in-person classes and group classes. That's all safe and socially distant, thanks to COVID. And but yeah, I would love to work with anyone of all walks of life and any locations. I can really translate this. That's what's awesome about the system, is it can be applied anywhere with any equipment and any space.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely let you know if we ever go to Georgia.
Awesome. Yeah, come visit.
Yeah, I'd love to check out your gym and your program and introduce you to my husband. So you'll help me even more in our rewilding journey here, adding more movement to my family's life. So
absolutely. Well, I really appreciate being on here. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, no, I feel like we could talk for hours on end.
Absolutely.
So it's really nice to find like-minded people. So Instagram has really helped me, find people who are on a similar journey and, of rewilding or adding more of like a primal living to their lives. So
yeah, same, right back at you.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thanks for being here, Brad. Have a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. Bye.